What is going on, and welcome back to another video in Finding Freedom, or Alpha Gents if you're watching this. So check this out, gents, people in Finding Freedom. If you're going to want freedom, you have to understand there is a difference between liberty and freedom. And if you're in Alpha Gents, you have to understand there is a difference between being a man and being a gentleman. So let's get into this because, well, everything is building up to, well, have a what's known as a snowball effect. If you watch Dave Ramsey, you understand that there is a snowball effect that you can do to pay off debt. But if there's nefarious actors or there's other personnel that are carrying out, I'll just use simple language, if there are bad people or evil people that are carrying out a plan to lead up to something, well then, are you trained and able to see those things efficiently and accordingly? So what do I mean by this? Let me adjust the camera real quick. So the title of this is Policy, Conflict, War, Chess, Go, right? So let's talk about this. First point, the first domino normally falls with new policy change, right? It affects certain things, right? I have here tear and emotions. So T, or not tear, but emotions bring tears, depending, right? T, time, energy, attention, right? Money, time is money. So if you want to mess with somebody, mess with their money, freedom, and a couple other things, right? Time, energy, and attention. So if you mess with somebody's freedom, you got an issue. You mess with their money, you really got an issue, right? You mess with both, that's a problem, right? Now you're messing with other stuff, and now we have a serious chaos, right? Or war, right? And that's a three-letter word. So let's talk about it. The first domino falls. They instill new policies. Oh, we're gonna bring tariffs. We're gonna bring this. In other words, we're broke and we're trying to figure out a way to make up a new word so that we could charge you money to bring on hardship, all right? And they sign off, etc., so that they can maintain certain people because they want raises because they, for some reason, I don't know why, they don't understand economics, right? And creating a win-win scenario for everybody. Instead, they want to feed into the emotions and to see how resourceful people can be so that they can study it, and then they'll use later on sentences or questions such as, who hurt you? Oh, you just weren't resourceful enough. Or this, that, and the third, playing this psychological game in order to enact an emotion, right? Are you red? Are you blue? Are you purple? Are you independent? What are you, right? Etc. To label you, to categorize you, to put you in a box so then they could utilize that psychologically to combat with you, right? Or to trigger certain things to throw you off guard, to go into a different psychological color code. Now, mind you, this is for educational purposes, but there is a color code in psychology, whether you're talking about personality types or if you're discussing how somebody elevates emotions such as anger, rage, etc. And then, of course, once they go to red, they're going to see black very soon. And then, of course, after that, there's a big issue, right? So the first domino falls with changes, right? Oh, we got this, now there's more weight put on your shoulders. We got inflation, so there's more weight put on your shoulders. You lost a job, there's more weight put on your shoulders. You got this, there's more weight put on your shoulders. How many things, right? And then they want to use words like, oh, bear your own cross or carry the cross, etc. But are you a cross? Right? And if you don't understand that vernacular, are you a traitor, right? A cross looks like a T, but it could also look like a sword, right? Do you know how to use your words, or do you know how to use other things? Or are you just lazy and so you compromise everything just to keep things the way they are because people don't like change, right? Or learning new stuff, right? So they knock over the first domino, affecting your time, energy, attention, and then striking you emotionally after that. Point number 2, conflict begins after changes in policy. See, emotions are triggered, patterns are disrupted, behavior changes, financial issues affect all attached to that type of currency or to that location all over. So even if there is a currency conversion and you're tied to whatever state or country you are, there's going to be things that affect you, right? Belief and faith get tested because you were praying for something and now something happened, right? And then you asked, what the hell's going on, right? And similar to the other video that I posted where I spoke briefly on spiritual text, whereas one could have got convicted when they were outlashing or going off in the temple, but yet another person got convicted later on. And I mentioned the book of Clarence, because if the person that flipped out in one location then got prosecuted later, but the person that actually got prosecuted, like in the book of Clarence, is on a cross asking, oh, why were they forsaken? Well, then the person that knows would have said, thank you, I could finally leave this place. The other person is crapping and shitting bricks because they thought they were doing something that was correct, and now they don't know why things are happening. Hence the question. This is why you need to understand and to read and look in between the lines, right? And then, of course, relationships fall apart, and then the escalation increases. The same thing is happening in the media, right? You hear about the policy changes. You hear about the different wars that are happening. You hear that Germany wants to take over NATO and kick the United States out, leaving them defenseless, when, of course, the United States was a neutral ground for people from all nations to come to and feel safe. But if you want to remove that safety net and have them feel or do something in a certain way and carry it out, you have to remember an attack on one is an attack on all. Just because someone got disowned doesn't mean they're not family, right? So if you have people from different areas here, for instance, I found this very comical. Everybody was doing the No Kings Parade and No Kings Protest or whatever, and even Congress was and senators were talking about it. And then a fucking king actually showed up. You know, Charles, who came from the UK. But doesn't Harry live in the United States? What, isn't the United States a part of NATO? Don't UK laws also reflect and still live within the United States? Disney enacted the King Charles Act. They also have other terminology that, well, reside within the legal context. I know because I went to the public law library and read, right? Some people don't. I do. I go the distance sometimes. And so it's one of those things that people will take advantage of certain scenarios, and then somebody shows up and you're like, oh, all of a sudden they're standing up and clapping, right? It's like the comedian Cat Williams, right? Why'd you get a Chrysler 300? Oh, because it looked like a Phantom and it's cheaper, right? And the other video I talked about what's the difference of Olivia and Audi, right? A German vehicle that had a name, Olivia, and let's say Christmas, and we'll call that another vehicle. Let's say it's a Honda, and that Honda, we'll just say Christmas or whatever, and you have Olivia and you have Christmas, right? And so Olivia was expensive. The repair bill's expensive. It looks good, everything, but does nothing for you that this other car can't do for you, right? You have to make a decision, right? And in that decision, finances change, other things change, patterns change, the way people look at you change because they're stuck on the logo. The Audi represents luxury. It represents certain things in a person's mind. The family vehicle doesn't. And so people look at you a certain way. And nothing is as it seems. And if nothing is as it seems, then are you actually understanding? Or have you been programmed a certain way to understand things a certain way, right? Now, mind you, I wrote this on Magic Day. So that would be, well, not Magic Day, but the holiday, I should say. It's not an actual holiday. But it was the 26th, and the year was 2026, and 26 plus 26 equals 52, like the weeks in a year. But moving forward, right? You have to remember that the shot clock runs out on everything. There's a time clock on a lot of things, even one's life, right? So how are you gonna go out? How are you gonna come in? How are you gonna survive? How are you gonna remain stable, etc.? So people get tired, right? That's one. This is how it builds up. Remember this. The shot clock runs out, people get tired. Internal and external issues escalate. You have issues within the house, you have issues with the people. They're raiding the house, and then internally they want reprimands and repercussions and all these other things, and they also want payback for a lot of other stuff, right? And then, of course, other things are going on, right? So you have things that are happening inside and outside. Then you have people begin to push back. They start to question. They start to show everything that's coming out, right? Oh, we want to build more server farms. We want to build more data farms. We want to have more surveillance. We want to do this. Okay, how does it affect the water? How does it affect this? Right? Because it doesn't look like this anymore. It's not clear. It's not white. It's not whatever, right? People don't want to drink it. It looks like sweet tea, but is it sweet tea, right? And then from there, authority gets tested, right? People violate. January 6th, shootings that happen at the White House. People shoot at the president. All these other things, right? That's another thing that happens. There's a disregard for rules and laws. Morals become flexible. We're gonna lie to see if we can go ahead and bring this person here. Or we're gonna do this to this type of individual to see how they react until they actually do something. Or we're gonna keep going until this, that, and the third. And then it goes back and forth because people don't know how to stop or understand and do what they're supposed to, right? Then people get desperate for a better life. Since nothing is being done, they become more flexible with, well, how and why certain things occur, right? They start to work together, or they start to begin to try to create a coup or blackmail somebody or entrap somebody, meaning plan, right? Either planning murders, planning theft, planning other stuff, violating certain things, getting people to abstain, whatever it's called, right? It rhymes somewhat. I think there's a differentiation. I think you abstain in court, which means to plead the fifth, or I got 5 on it, etc. And then of course, death shows up, right? And when death shows up, things become very real for people, just like the shootings, just like other stuff. The Marine on the train in New York City got in trouble for doing the right thing and standing up, but because there was involuntary manslaughter, meaning the person died, or manslaughter, however they deemed it, the person died, so on and so forth, he got looked at a bad way. And then of course, they gave a bad reputation to the Marines. So just like I mentioned in other videos, they don't want Marines in certain areas doing certain things. They'll just leave you alone. They won't even do it anymore. And then what happens in Charlotte, North Carolina? Similar scenario, except the person gets away with what they're doing, stabs a woman on the train or the light rail, and then all of a sudden they have a conflict saying that there's crime elevating in the area. When if there was an individual that was able to ride that thing and step in accordingly, would have been able to handle that situation, and nobody would have been at fault, and they would have been alive. What do I mean no one would be at fault? Because they were doing the right thing. They were defending someone domestically that might have been here from an international area or not. Would you rather have someone be around to protect your child if there was a shooting at your school, like what happened in California? Or would you rather that these shooters get away with everything and then get charged for it later, because at their end of the day, they just think, well, I'm gonna end up dead anyways, might as well do what I want to, laws don't care, so we're just gonna shoot as many people as possible, etc., and then take ourselves out. That was portrayed on the news, right? It was in the media. That's what I saw through my phone. That's what I validated with other areas and other pieces of technology. But if somebody was there to stop it from happening, would you prefer that they were there? Or would you get upset and you would give them a bad label, create a false thing, so on and so forth, remove and pretty much strip away security because you think you can handle it yourself? Now let's go into chess, right? Because the title is Policy, Conflict, War, Chess. Now, we talked about policy changes. What that does, it creates conflict. From conflict, war comes after, right? And in a game, if people think it's a game, well, if they're moving like they move on a chessboard, well, you have to look at the chess pieces. See, a pawn or spawn, if you've seen the movie, worked for somebody, right? Their powers were limited. It's also one of the weakest pieces on the board. They could turn into everything later on, but it's not like, how do I say this? Not to knock on Spawn, but Spawn can only do but so many things until something else stronger steps in, right? So think about it like that. Or the differences between Thunderbolts, Avengers, and the Captain Marvels, so on and so forth, right? Thunderbolts handled one thing, Avengers handled bigger things, and then Captain Marvel and everybody else could handle the other stuff if there was an emergency, right? Then you have Knights, right? So you have Knights Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina, or Knights that were in the realm, or that, you know, King Arthur or whatever, just to bring understanding, but they're pieces on a board, right? And these are worth, well, let's say 3 points, right? Whereas the pawn is 1 point, right? The knight, they can jump and they can move in an L fashion and change color. They could go from a black square to a white square, etc., and do whatever they need to in order to protect the realm on their side of the board, or to win over the other realm. Then you have the snipers, right? You have the bishops, right? The bishops are also worth 3. And if you do your research, these are, and I have notes here, if you do your research, these are your long range. They have to stay in their lane. So if the bishop's on a black square, it stays on a black square. If it's on a white square, it has to stay on a white square. It doesn't get to have the differentiation, right, that the knight has, that goes pretty much almost anywhere. But it moves in a different pattern and a shorter pattern. If you're going to travel in a straight line quickly and it's a long distance, well, you want to travel in the shortest way possible to conserve your gas or your mileage. See, the knight will creep and do short stops, etc., and then continue. The bishop can attack in a long range, right? Now, when it comes to the rook is the second most powerful piece on the board, right? It's normally worth about 5 points from my thing. It's utilized in endgame strategy. It's also utilized in other areas. However, it works in files and columns, right? It moves in straight lines, right? It can't move diagonally or catty corner similar to a bishop. It cannot move like a knight. But why is it powerful? Well, it's powerful because it gets to travel like the bishop, right? It gets to switch colors, right, like the knight, and it can attack short and long range, and the king normally can castle on king side or queen side in order to get out of the way of danger, so that the security, the rook, can step in, right, and say, back up for a second, right, or get over here, etc. You stay here, I'll handle this, sir, whatever. Then you have the queen. Now, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. Why is the queen the most powerful piece on the board? Well, the queen gets to do whatever she wants, right? She gets to go wherever. She can move however she wants. She can move like a bishop. She can move like a pawn. She can move like a knight. She can move like a rook. Because she can move as those 4 things, she can also put herself in danger if the person that's telling her to do and carry out certain things doesn't know what they're doing, because they're playing tactically, they're not playing strategically, or they're not combining the two. Tactics will lose to strategy, and strategy will normally win when tactics are applied effectively and carried out. Now, why is spawn, or should I say the pawn, the special piece, valuable, even though it's worth 1 point? Well, just like in life, how you can become anything you want, a pawn can do the same. So if the knight, the bishop, the queen, and the king need that to occur, right, and the queen either wants to sacrifice herself, or the queen gets put in a position because the king didn't see something coming, and then she gets taken, right, because she wanted to hook up with somebody on the other side, and that person had nothing but bad intentions for them, and now they've been taken out. Well, the king needs a queen, or the king needs another piece because a piece has been removed off the board. But the king was always looking out for the little one, you know what I'm saying? Which is the pawn on the board, because the pawn can become whatever piece as long as it makes it to the other side. And if you look at it from this viewpoint, right, in a conflict, in a war, If the piece was able to go to the other side and then got put into power, well, that person that got put into power, who was once a pawn, can be put into parliament. It could be put into Congress. It could be put into Senate. It could be put into government. It could be put into law, whatever the case may be, right? That's a pawn. That's a child, right? That's the little one, right? It could become a business person. It could become a salesperson. It could become a marketer, finance, etc., whatever the case may be. The person that's locked in normally stays locked in unless forced, right, to change, right? You got fired. They won't let you do other stuff. They're treating you like Leonardo da Vinci, who wasn't able to do other stuff to make money. He only had to do artwork, and that was the only way he could make money. Until war broke out, then they let him back in and let him do whatever he wants, and they paid him whatever he needed and as much as he needed. Right? So we have an understanding now of chess. Now, the last portion you need to understand is Go. Go is an Asian game, and it's used strategically, whereas chess is used in a different way, right? Chess, you want to control the center, you want to do other things, you don't mind making sacrifices of the pieces, etc., because at the end of the day, you just want to win, right, and protect the king. Whereas in Go, right, it's to control as much market share as possible, as much territory as possible, right? And then done with chess pieces on the field, it can be done by way of marriage, compromise, blackmail, entrapment, death, also delisting an area to rebuild for the cheap. Now, why do I use these different words? Well, if you want to okay, let's go back up a little bit. So I mentioned marriage. Back in the day in history, if you wanted a peace treaty, your daughter would get married to the next in line to the throne, and then there would be a peace treaty between those two countries. And then, of course, that's capturing and uniting two areas, increasing your market share. Right? Then when it comes to compromise, somebody cheated, someone lied, someone did something just to get their way and lied somewhere, and now something is compromised, so they took advantage to obtain market share, individual, a piece, etc. Blackmail and entrapment, although two different words done by two different individuals, right? You have criminals on one side, you also have the law on another, right? The law can be doing one thing, whereas the criminals on the other side can be doing another thing. Remember, in another video I stated, even in the medical community, pain can be described by different words, right? Similarly, if someone is broke, homeless, or whatever, they're deemed crazy and people use the vernacular. If they have money and they're acting the same way, they utilize the terminology eccentric, right? So you have to remember those dynamics. And then, of course, I remember, because I got in trouble for saying this out loud, but we have equal rights now and both parties go into conflict. But when I was thinking about becoming a priest, I had my instructor, who was a priest, Father Ralph, state something of the fact that, well, you know, priests can't get married, this, that, and the third. And I said, yes, they can. And they normally do this test to see if you actually read the material or if you cheated, right? Because he quickly said, if you can show me in the book where it states that, then I'll let you get away with it and we could go further and I could show you something else. And I was like, oh, no problem, right here. And in the book, it stated that priests could get married to widows with children because children need a father, right? Now, why is that? Well, because in history, before women were allowed to go into war, only men were going, right? So if the men went to conflict or war, they 9 times out of 10, if they made it back, they'd be fine. If they died, well, to keep the species alive or the culture or the community alive, clergy members might step away and get married, etc. They already are in good standing, they have an understanding, they're informed, and, well, there's somebody to assist in watching children or taking care of them, as well as providing a safe space in the absence thereof. Or you can watch the movie Shooter with Mark Wahlberg. His friend got murdered, and then he had to step in because they were also after his wife or whatever the case may be. And so he had to handle that situation. Then when he was put in the orange jumpsuit and everything played out, Danny Glover's character still bragged and boasted in front of everybody and silently unfortunately, the other people in the room afterwards pretty much gave him carte blanche to handle it on his own, and they weren't going to say anything about it. And you saw how that ended up. And then afterwards, he handled it his way and dealt with everything. And then at the end of the movie, he's actually leaving with the person that died, the friend or whatever the case, with the lady that he was married to, because, well, they grew into a partnership, right? Similar concept to other things, right? Now, let's move forward. In the TV show Hustle, there is a bad practice in real estate where people will intentionally, what's known as delist an area, right? An A-listed area would be what they would deem as a gentrified area, right? It's expensive, there's nice stuff, etc. The moment they want to start making it look as a bad investment, a delisted property, think of it like grades in a classroom, A, B, C, D, E, F, right? D is very bad, or dangerous area, so on and so forth. And you can notice this by the pawn shops, by check cashing places, etc., because there's only certain types of individuals of a demographic and psychology or psychographic that lives and resides in those areas, and they can invest in those areas on the cheap because nobody wants to deal with that, right? Or they could do it intentionally. They could bring in and release criminals into that area that just don't know when to quit or give up, and then they bring chaos to the area, and that A-listed area quickly goes to a delisted area. Then that gives grounds for other investors who want to, well, invest, to get things at, well, rock bottom prices, etc., right? And then they're able to purchase stuff super cheaply because, well, it's a dangerous area. So if they're able to do that, they could purchase the homes, they could purchase the businesses, the buildings, the real estate that the business resides on, kick the business out of there, or increase the rent, etc. And now people either have to make a choice. They either put up or shut up. They put up the funds needed to, afford the rent or the other stuff that gets introduced, or they can leave the area and go somewhere else. And that's what happens, right? And the same thing happens, right? So you have your policy changes, you have the media that comes into place, you have conflicts that occur, then a war breaks out, and then other stuff starts happening. So I hope you guys understood this. You took it as a grain of salt, threw it over your shoulder, whatever the case, and I will see you guys on the next video for Finding Freedom. And if you're in Alpha Gents, it's a pleasure to have you here. Peace.